Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of DBPACast, the podcast from de Blase Parente Associados.
Today, we are pleased to welcome a very special guest joining us from South Africa, Dr. Joanne Van Harmelen, an intellectual property lawyer at Adams & Adams, one of the most respected firms across the African continent.
Joanne, on behalf of DBPA and especially of Gabriel de Blase, who is a good friend of yours, I would like to thank you for joining us today. It's a real pleasure to have you here. So our conversation today is all about trends and opportunities for business in Africa and how intellectual property plays a key role in the fast-evolving environment.
Joanne, thank you so much for being here. To start, could you tell us a bit about your background and the work Adams has been doing to support companies with IP protection across Africa?
Thank you so much, first of all, for having me on the podcast. It's very exciting to be part of this type of program. So I head up the life sciences IP team at Adams & Adams in the patent department. And we're a very big law firm. We're the largest IP law firm on the continent of Africa. And apart from our offices in South Africa, we have 23 associate offices across the continent in various countries. And so we're able to leverage local expertise across the continent with those associate offices. And I think that really puts us ahead of the pack in terms of being able to advise our clients with respect to IP. And so that's really a little bit about the firm and a bit about myself.
So our first round of questions is regarding Africa's growth drivers and IP context. So Africa is undergoing remarkable transformation driven by rapid economic growth, urbanization, and digital innovation. According to the International Monetary Fund, 6 African nations are projected to be among the world's top 10 fastest growing economies in 2025. How is this growth impacting the business landscape and intellectual property activity on the continent, Joanne?
Thanks, Paula. So Africa really is buzzing with opportunity right now, and we're seeing rapid economic and technological growth, particularly in sectors like fintech, digital tech, AI, agri-tech, healthcare, and renewable energy right across the continent. And this surge, because of the surge, we're seeing increased intellectual property filing as well, particularly where there are national and regional systems like ARIPO and ORP. And we see a lot of businesses that really are becoming more sophisticated around the importance of protecting their innovations through IP and then going on to leverage the IP for commercialization. The other thing which we're seeing on the continent is regional integration efforts. I mean, there's 52 countries on the continent, and so to try and integrate the different IP systems is an important factor. And recently, the African Continental Free Trade Area was signed, and this organization is aiming to harmonize not only trade, but also the IP regulations across the continent. There are, of course, still challenges. We see a lot of counterfeiting on the continent. And of course, because you've got all of these multiple countries, there are still quite complex regulatory frameworks. So you really do need locally informed IP strategies, if you want to have a successful business on the market. And that's where a firm like ANA, Adams & Adams, can come into play.
Interesting. Urbanization is also accelerating, with 50% of the population expected to live in cities by 2030, and increasing demand for infrastructure, houses, fast-moving consumer goods and services. How do you see this rapid urban growth creating opportunities and challenges for business entering African markets?
Yeah, I mean, rapid urban growth in Africa is creating both very exciting opportunities, but also some challenges for businesses entering the market. If we look at the opportunities, we certainly see things happening in sectors like construction, retail, healthcare, fintech, digital services, renewable energy. And as I said before, these sorts of things really do lead to increased innovation on the continent. And we are seeing increased intellectual property filings where companies are looking at protecting new technologies, they're looking at protecting their brands, they're looking at product designs, all tailored for the urban consumer. Then brand and technology protection is also becoming more critical. Something that's quite important, which not everybody realizes, is that there are a few African countries that actually have a first-to-file trademark system. And those are, for example, Algeria, Ghana, Morocco. So if you're dealing in countries like those, you really need to register your trademark early so that you don't have brand hijacking happening. Of course, as I say, there are also challenges. We are, as I mentioned, seeing counterfeiting being a major issue still on the continent. But we, at the same time, are seeing countries, particularly like Egypt, Nigeria, Kenya, and South Africa, that are strengthening their enforcement against counterfeiting through things like mandatory trademark recordals, for example, in Kenya. Another complexity, of course, would be the regulatory aspects. Obviously, we've got 52 countries. It's fragmented in terms of IP and the regulatory systems. And then we, as I said, are looking at sort of upcoming initiatives like the African Continental Free Trade Area, which is looking to harmonize IP and trade regulations across the continent. And in terms of copyright, we've got the Kampala Protocol, which was part of a REPO's copyright registration system.
Really interesting, Joanne. Thank you. So our second set of questions is regarding key sectors and innovation. Healthcare and pharmaceuticals stand out as strategic sectors. Africa is becoming a hub for disruptive healthcare innovation, attracting over 550 million investments between 2020 and 2023. How does IP play a role in supporting this expansion, particularly in vaccine manufacturing and digital health solutions?
In terms of vaccine manufacturing, and particularly since COVID, we're seeing a lot more activity on the continent in this space. There are several African countries that are looking to produce local manufacturing capacity. South Africa, Egypt, Senegal, Nigeria, Tunisia, Kenya are all part of the African Vaccine Manufacturing Accelerator, and they're looking to try and produce 60% of the continent's vaccine needs locally by 2040. Obviously, with local manufacturing and local innovation in the health space, we're seeing patents playing a key role in protecting vaccine technologies, not only by local players, but of course also by foreign companies that are filing on the African continent. And we're seeing more tech transfer deals and regional collaborations, as I said, particularly since COVID. So for example, in South Africa, there is a company called BioVac, and another company called Afrogen. BioVac has formulation and filling expertise for vaccines. Afrogen has delivery system expertise, and they partnered together with Pfizer, and they were basically part of the COVID mRNA vaccine program. The idea was going to be that BioVac was going to produce mRNA vaccines together with Afrogen under license from Pfizer's technology across the continent. Of course, with COVID vaccines being less needed, that's kind of fizzled out to a degree. And so now the companies are trying to pivot and figure out other ways to use the technology so that they can still go forward. And then in addition to that, of course, because you've got these collaborations happening, we're seeing agreements that have incorporated IP clauses between these types of companies that define the rights and obligations. They have to very importantly deal with things like access to know-how, which is a really core component. It's not just about the patented sort of information. There's a lot of background know-how that needs to be accessed as well. And in this way, it strengthens Africa's vaccine manufacturing capabilities. Then on the digital health solutions side, there are countries in Africa like Nigeria and Kenya particularly, but also Ghana and Egypt that are really strong in the kind of software solutions space. And then obviously with digital health, data privacy becomes a really key consideration. And interestingly, we're seeing that 39 out of the 52 African countries have enacted data protection laws, which is a lot. And 34 of them have established data protection authorities. Kenya and Nigeria are probably leading in enforcement, whereas South Africa actually mandates companies to implement personal information protection policies in our papaya legislation.
Awesome. And Africa is leading in digital transformation, especially with financial technology and mobile money solutions, driving financial inclusion across East and West Africa. How can strong IP strategies help protect and scale these type of innovations?
Yeah, absolutely. It's exciting. And I think one of the reasons why we're seeing a lot of this is it's a country, or at least it's a continent where there wasn't a lot already in existence. So we had a population that was looking for solutions and could tap into really kind of cutting edge innovation right from the very start. And so we're seeing fintech platforms like M-Pesa, Flutterwave, Chippercash that are expanding across borders, and IP is becoming a very important strategic tool, not just for protection, but actually for growth. And we find that it obviously supports innovation. It also allows you to attract funding and collaboration, and it ensures that African solutions remain African-owned. We are certainly seeing intellectual property being a powerful tool that enables strategic partnerships, and it allows secure platforms to be scaled across the continent. We're seeing infrastructure gaps being bridged through collaborations, cross-border interoperability happening, which is very important for mobile money. And we're seeing tailored digital solutions being able to be delivered to underserved communities.
Very interesting, Joanne. And our third round of questions about regulatory challenges and IP landscape. I love these ones. So Africa's IP landscape is complex with a mix of national and regional systems, each with unique procedures and requirements. What are the main challenges that companies face when seeking to protect their IP assets in Africa?
Thanks. I think, as I've already mentioned, probably one of the biggest issues is the fact that we have so many countries on the continent, each with their own IP system. And that can, of course, then require companies to file in multiple territories, which, of course, increases costs and the complexity. As I said earlier, you can get around that by trying to leverage the regional systems. And if you file a repo and an ORP patent application, for example, and then perhaps just choose Nigeria, South Africa, and some of the North African countries, you can pretty much cover the whole continent with not that many filings. So the regional systems really do play an important role. The other complexity is procedural hurdles. So, for example, there are a number of countries that still require notarized or even legalized documents. They need to be original, and that can be quite onerous for applicants to get together and get filed on time. It can cause registration delays. It can even cause problems with filing if you're not aware of what you need to do in good time before you need to file. The other thing is enforcement. Enforcement across the continent really does vary quite widely. It depends very much on the country and the experience of the courts in terms of how successful enforcement is going to be. So countries like South Africa, Kenya, Nigeria have very strong frameworks. There's been litigation. The courts are efficient and effective. And so enforcement works there, but there are a lot of other countries that just don't have the capacity or the infrastructure or the experience in terms of enforcement. So it's really important to get the intel when you are considering your filing strategy on the continent to decide, where to actually file and how to protect your rights if enforcement is going to be a problem through the courts in terms of IP protection. You maybe want to look at contractual opportunities instead, for example, in those countries.
And given these complex requirements of Africa's IP landscape, what strategies or best practices would you recommend for companies to effectively secure and enforce their IP rights across different African jurisdictions?
So some of the key pointers, as I've mentioned before, would be to really leverage those regional filing systems like a repo, like a WAPI where possible, because that's going to reduce your administrative burden and often it reduces your costs as well. Then the other thing is to make sure that you consider which countries in Africa have first to file trademark filing regimes. And in those countries, you need to prioritize your filings as soon as you can, because obviously you don't want to be working with a partner in that country and then the partner goes and registers your trademark instead of you, and you end up in a scenario where you're having to pay license fees to your distributor in that country, which you really don't want. And then also look at the key markets where there are strong enforcement frameworks. So you may want to focus your filing strategies on places like South Africa, Kenya, Nigeria, Ghana, other countries where there's a sort of a stronger framework in terms of enforcement. Then the other thing is to consider counterfeiting. You really, particularly in the pharmaceuticals, fast-moving consumer goods, electronics industries, you want to look at anti-counterfeiting measures. And experts like Adams and Adams that are on the ground in Africa, we have our regional offices, we understand those procedural and cultural nuances. And so we can really give you that strategic advice in terms of how best to move forward on the continent.
Yes, it's very important working with local experts who really knows the details. So as we near the end of this episode, the last set of questions is about Brazil and Africa connections and future trends. Brazil and Africa share many similarities in terms of growth potential and challenges. Joanne, what opportunities do you see for Brazilian companies looking to expand into African markets?
Thanks, Paula. We are definitely seeing investment of Brazilian companies into Africa, particularly in the energy and infrastructure sectors, as well as in green tech, agri-tech, and fintech. Some examples, we've got Petrobras, which has acquired stakes in oil exploration blocks across South Africa, Namibia, and Sao Tome and Principe. We've got the opportunities for Brazilian engineering firms because, as we've seen, there's a lot of urbanization on the African continent. So there are opportunities in urban infrastructure. And then we're also seeing quite a big push on the continent for renewable energy, particularly in solar and green hydrogen. So those sorts of collaborations offer opportunities as well. And then, of course, on the agri-tech side, Brazil and East and West Africa have very similar climates. And so Brazil's expertise in tropical agriculture is quite well suited to the farming needs for those regions. And there can be collaborations there, particularly in things like, for example, cocoa and food processing sectors, as well as climate smart agriculture and irrigation techniques.
That's so interesting. But now looking ahead, Joanne, what are the big trends in IP you foresee for Africa in the next 5 to 10 years? And how can our law firm work together with Adams and Adams to support global IP strategies?
Thanks, Anna. I think really the biggest trend that we're seeing on the continent is this harmonization effort through Africa to streamline trade and IP regulations. And as I said, we are seeing IP filings rising, particularly in strategic sectors like fintech, healthcare, agri-tech, renewable energy. And this is being driven by digital innovation and mobile platforms. We're also seeing a focus on affordable medicines. And I think COVID really taught the continent a lesson in terms of making sure that local manufacturing capacity is something that is being built. I think as that continues to happen, we'll see an increase in investment. We're definitely going to see increases in collaboration. We'll probably see increases in IP filings and hopefully the ability to produce vaccines on the continent. Then I think we're also, because counterfeiting is such an issue, we are definitely going to see strengthening of IP enforcement and anti-counterfeiting measures on the continent. Also with the regulatory frameworks around Indigenous knowledge and bioprospecting. Some countries are already ahead of the pack. South Africa has quite a comprehensive bioprospecting legislation, but I think we're going to see more happening across the continent. REPO has a protocol which they hasn't yet come into effect, but it has been signed, and that also deals with bioprospecting. So yeah, I do think that that's going to be a space to watch. So I think in terms of working together, these types of events, the podcast that we're doing now, possibly webinars and that sort of thing, can really help educate both of our clients about the opportunities in Brazil for Africans and in Africa for Brazilians. So I'm quite excited to continue with these sorts of events. And thank you again so much for inviting me to be part of this.
I totally agree, Joanne. Thank you so much for sharing these valuable insights with us today.
Thank you so much.
This episode really shows that Africa is a vibrant and growing market full of new opportunities, and that intellectual property is a cornerstone for companies looking to succeed there. These trends highlight how essential collaboration between firms like ours is to help companies navigate this evolving landscape.